Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello, I'm Thomas Hubert, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. Welcome to this week's podcast. Later on this show.
So there's a huge battle ahead, but there is support in many member states to increase the CAP budget, and we have to get stuck in over the next 12 months and try and make it happen.
Discussions are heating up on the future of your CAP payments after 2020, but proposals to reduce the budget available remain the main source of concern.
Well, we leave home with a van full of gear, a tractor baler, a tractor and wrapper, drive a half an hour to Baltimore, get on the Roro, do a 40-minute journey across the water. We bale somewhere in the region of 700 bales in, say, 3 days.
And making silage on Cape Clare Island. A contractor tells us about his annual odyssey. But first, let's check in on the harvest situation. The current drought means that winter crops are ready early, while spring ones are struggling. I met Tillage farmer Bobby Miller, who chairs the Irish Grain Growers Group, at the latest round of CAP consultations this Wednesday.
The reality is I'll be starting my harvest at the end of the week, which is unheard of in our parts of the world and in the Midlands. A lot of crops are coming to the stage of ripeness. Another problem is that crops are coming in very uneven in fields. Cooler parts of the field are still green and other parts are bone dry and ready to cut. So that's the biggest issue at the minute. But farmers are holding off because of the weather is so dry. They're holding off and making a start. But slowly but surely the harvest will start this week for winter barley.
How are spring crops doing on the other side?
Looking like a disaster in a lot of areas. Ground just drying out, crops going white from being burnt, burning, getting white from the ground up. Top leaves are okay in a lot of places. Grain didn't shoot out completely, the head didn't shoot out completely, which is worrying. The straw is scarce. Just pure drought circumstances now at this stage, and crops are looking poor, and that's the reality of the situation at the minute.
The forecast at the moment is for the drought to continue. What kind of impact would that have? What kind of time can those spring crops survive before they actually need rain to just happen?
Look, the reality is crops need moisture in May and June to get full potential, and that hasn't happened. If rain does come now, it is only not going to solve the situation. We're looking to a spring crop, very poor yields at the end of the day now. It's just too late in many respects, but rain would be welcome to try and boost the filling process of the grain, but it's too little too late in many respects. But we will welcome rain in open arms at this stage too. Unfortunately, winter barley growers are in a little bit of catch-22 situation. They want the rain, but they don't want rain to harvest the crops. So you're never happy as a farmer, but that is the reality. Some crops need rain and others are at harvesting stage and you don't need bad weather for that either. So you can never win at this farming game.
On the other side of the industry, we've livestock farmers who are running out of grass, and I suppose a number of people have mentioned the opportunity for tillage and livestock farmers to work more directly together, to do maybe a bit more contract growing and then whole cropping and those options. How do you see this developing at the moment?
A lot of questions about whole cropping at the minute, and a lot of people have no experience of it, never had to even try to look for crops to harvest. Get good advice on it, get an independent evaluator if it needs to be, if you're dealing with someone that you're not familiar with, for both parties to be happy on a price to be settled at. It's hard, you have to walk the crop before you realise the value of the crop, and that's the first step you have to take. With the harvest being so early, say with winter crops, there is possibilities again in cash crops as well. Crops considered are stubble turnips, Worcester Waltz grass, crops like that could be a financial option for both parties as well.
And get a livestock farmer to come and graze it directly.
Graze, or with the likes of Worcester Waltz grass, is cut silage off it, and it would fit to cut before you have to start plowing again for winter crops. So it could be a win-win situation in that regard, but going into unknown area as well. So look, this has been a difficult year. A lot of different thoughts on how to progress. A fierce amount of talk on the likes of social media by younger farmers, what to do and what solutions is out there, and everyone looking for advice. And look, the real solution is rain for many farmers.
We're here at a new phase of the CAP consultation between all the stakeholders in the industry and the Department of Agriculture. We know now the initial proposal from the Commission for the CAP after 2020. What's your key message? What do you come here for to say to the department?
The reality is the tillage area has reduced by 20% in the last few years. Over the last 100 years, you could say, is a third of what it used to be, maybe a quarter at this stage. The weather, the way it is, it just shows the importance of the tillage sector, and tillage may be brought to the forefront of the CAP reform now into the future. It has a positive effect for all sectors as regards traceability of food, quality of grain. There's many aspects that the tillage sector has to play to improve everyone's lot in all sectors.
So how would that translate in how payments are managed in the next 7 years, and what would you expect to happen on that front for your members?
You would take one positive thing that's after happening in the tillage sector, and that's probably the protein payment. That shows where targeted financing of a project can pay dividends for farmers, and the fact that we're growing protein crops now that's fully traceable is key for the likes of Borbia for promoting Irish food grade crops and food like beef, lamb and dairy products. More people are well able to get access to information on their source of their food now, and it's key that we have a fully traceable product to offer when we go for these key markets.
Okay, Bobby Miller, Irish Greenbird Group, thank you very much.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Now let's spend the next while in County Clare, where the Irish Farmers Journal held the latest of its public events on farming along the Wild Atlantic Way. There, my colleague Hannah Quinn Mulligan met the Director General of the IFA, Damien MacDonald. Just like me and Bobby earlier, they talked about the future of CAP, this time using the example of Clare farmers who receive €70 million in farm payments every year.
Between Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, I think it's 46 million in Pillar 1 and about 24 million in Pillar 2. So, yeah, obviously the most recent proposals from the Commission will be very damaging in that while the cut has been flagged, proposed cut in the Common Agricultural Policy has been flagged at 5%. When you factor in inflation and use the European Union's own proxy inflation figure of 2%, the actual impact will be over 15%. So if you take the 70 million that's currently coming into Clare, the real value of that will effectively be down by 10 million under the new proposals. So it's very clear that there's a huge fight underway to increase the CAP budget. And while there's lots of debate about the nitty-gritty of what's in CAP, the real issue is we need to get the budget up, because if we have to take the cuts currently proposed, it's going to be a disaster for Irish agriculture.
Brendan Gleeson at the Oireachtas Committee during the week, he's with the Department of Agriculture, said that I think it's 18 member states, the Ministers of Agriculture there, have indicated that they're willing to increase the budget. So we have a few more to go. Is there a hope that the budget will be increased and CAP will be maintained, or is that a fairy tale that we're being sold?
Well, look, I think everything is still on the table to be discussed. I think one of the problems is that while the European Union budget is actually being increased, member states are going to contribute more, although some member states are still reluctant to do that. The percentage allocation to CAP is down from 38% to 28%. So there are two problems. One is the size of the overall EU budget, and that's a battle to be had, and it has to be agreed unanimously by the member states. And then the second battle is what portion of that goes to the Common Agricultural Policy. And unfortunately, under the latest proposals, there's a lot of new spending on areas like security and migration, and that money is effectively coming out of the Common Agricultural Policy budget. So there's a huge battle ahead, but there is support in many member states to increase the CAP budget, and we have to get stuck in over the next 12 months and try and make it happen.
Farmers will be looking to you for leadership in the next CAP budget and proposals, and there's a meeting I know on Wednesday with the department. I mean, what can farmers hope from that? One thing that a lot of farmers will be hoping for is a suckler payment. Is that something that's on the cards for the IFA?
Well, look, it's very early days in terms of looking at the detail of the new proposals. The legislative proposals were only published on the 1st of July, and one thing I'd say to every farmer out there, there's a huge spectrum of views. IFA is a democratic organisation. There's a huge spectrum of views across different commodities, different parts of the country. But we must keep the focus on a unified campaign on the budget. There'll be time enough to fight amongst ourselves and how we distribute it. And that would be the one message I give to farmers. Don't get distracted. Politicians now will bring everyone into the room next week and hope for a jamboree, and we're all fighting with each other over various detailed aspects of the proposals, and that gets politicians off the hook. So my message to farmers will be, when you meet your politician, talk about the budget and the need to increase that, and the value of the Common Agricultural Policy to farmers, but also to society in general. It contributes to a safe supply of food, which is taken for granted. Look what it does for the environment, and look what it does for the rural economy. So I think there's lots of good arguments to make, and we just need to be a bit careful about being distracted about beating each other up over, the nitty-gritty of what's in the proposals.
So get the budget first and then we'll work out the details.
Absolutely, and clearly, look, on the suckler cow side, I think there's an opportunity to put pressure on the government to do something on the suckler cow payment before we talk about the next cap. That's not the 2021. The suckler cow sector needs support now. So we have a budget coming up. The government has more money than it's had for a while, and we're not far away from having an election either. And we need to put pressure on our own politicians to get more backing for the suckler sector in the budget, and from the national government, rather than just waiting for the debate about the Common Agricultural Policy. Because, of course, they'll be quick to point out as well that if we have to bring in a new suckler cow payment as part of the Common Agricultural Policy, it'll have to come off something else. And I think we need to give a strong message to the government. We need more support for the suckler sector from the central government coffers, and we need it urgently.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Kilrush Credit Union in County Clare is one of the growing number of credit unions offering loans to farmers under the Cultivate brand. Its chief executive, Matt Heslin, talked to Hannah about the details of the scheme.
What would, say, be the rate of interest on the loans, and how much would be available for farmers? If I went in today, what are the terms and conditions of that loan, say?
Well, the first term and condition is that you pay it back.
Yeah. Okay, I'll work on that, yeah.
After that, so we're offering up to a 7-year term on 50,000 is the maximum, and it's unsecured. So we will do a good due diligence with the farmer. The rate is 6.75 APR, so 6.55 nominal. And once we have enough information, we can assess the loan. We'll advise whether the loan is actually, our key thing is, can the farmer repay the loan? And if he can, well, that's what we're interested in. And so the repayability is the most important factor. That's why we're not interested in the collateral. And the farmers, as I said, the average loan is about 17,000. So they're borrowing for a specific purpose. And we marketed the product. We asked farmers what they wanted. And what we found was that they wanted to have a relationship with a financial institution, and they told us that that's disappearing for the farmers at Clare anyway, with the bigger banks. And they wanted to know who was going to grant their loan. If the loan wasn't being granted, why wasn't it being granted? And they wanted that key relationship. And being a credit union, we have relationships with our members. That's what we work on. Offices are open. I have 6 teller positions. They're often all used. People come in and they chat to whoever's there. So,
and is the money there? Because the perception might be that the financial muscle might not be with the credit union. Is the money there to lend?
There isn't even a T-shirt to fit over our muscles, over our financial muscles. We have 16 billion is the total value of credit unions in Ireland, and of that 12 billion is sitting on lent waiting for someone to borrow it. Obviously we won't lend it to people who it wouldn't be appropriate to lend to, but we do lend to everybody, So the community isn't just those people it was set up for, it is everybody. And this morning we hear about the pressure on suckler hares, we hear the pressure on direct payments, we hear the pressure on farming communities, people staying around. Farming is part of our community.
That was Matt Heslin of Kilrush Credit Union. Stay tuned to our podcast. After this break, we're visiting the Burren.
As the country burns up, this week's Irish Farmers Journal has essential advice for all farmers on how to deal with the drought. We have top tips on how to keep water flowing on your farm, and our livestock specialists answer your questions. Plus, we reveal how the average farmer stands to lose €3,000 under the new cap, and the annual KPMG and Irish Farmers Journal Milk Price Review exclusively reveals the average milk price paid to farmers in 2017. This week's Irish Farmers Journal is on sale now.
One of the most unusual landscapes in County Clare is also the backdrop for one of the most successful agri-environmental schemes in Europe. That's the Burren. Irish Farmers Journal beef editor Adam Woods met Brendan Dunford, the manager of the Burren programme, in one of the region's distinctive rocky fields.
Tell me a little bit about, I suppose, the Burren and the history of the Burren in terms of from a farmer point of view.
Okay, the Burren, I suppose, it means land of stone, and there's plenty of what we call limestone here. A lot of you will have a picture of the Burren, this big tablet of bare limestone. It's actually not all like that. There's plenty of bits of good grassland in between. But I suppose the difference is in the Burren, water is a real shortage here in the Burren, especially on a hot summer's day like this. But there's an old tradition in the Burren called winterage, and that's because of the lack of water in summertime. These grasslands couldn't really be grazed. So many years ago, farmers put their cattle up to these hills in wintertime, where there's plenty of water in the turlocks in the springs. There's a good dry lie on the limestone, it's like an underfloor heating system, and they have plenty of forage, plenty of these rare grassland species and herbs to eat over the course of the wintertime. So that tradition has run here for thousands and thousands of years, and in fact we know that farming in the Burren started 5,800 years ago. There's a monument here called Paul na Brón, built by farmers way back then.
So that tradition has fallen off, maybe I would say go back a good few years, but you're trying to reverse that trend.
Yeah, I suppose there's been a decline in the management of these areas, these rough grasslands, basically because there's so much time involved and there's so little financial gain from it. So a lot of these upland areas, these rough grasslands, have been abandoned or reduced in grazing, and the farming has kind of moved to the lowlands, which are more fertile and more accessible to machinery and stuff like that. So when farmers move off these areas, these lovely species-rich grasslands that we're standing on now, they start to disappear because scrub takes over. So we've created a programme called the Burren programme, where we reward farmers for grazing these grasslands. The better they graze them, the higher the score we give them and the more money, because by grazing them well, you keep the scrub back and you create a space for these tiny little rare plants to thrive.
So how many farmers are involved in the programme? What sort of payments would a typical farmer be expected to get as part of this programme?
We've about 350 farmers in the programme at the moment. The average payment last year was about $6,500. Now that's on top of GLOS, so it's a higher level scheme if you like. And I suppose the farmers we have, some of them we've had working with us now for 6 years, and I think they really like this programme because it's very farmer friendly. We support the farmer in terms of he makes all the decisions on his or her farm. We give him support with paperwork. We give him the payment then, of course, as well. So it's a very good programme, and it's nice now to see the principle of this programme being adopted elsewhere in Ireland and across Europe as well.
We're standing here. Tell us a little bit of what's good and what's bad here around us, Brendan. So you named a few flowers there a second ago. Just what are we standing on?
It depends on your perspective. Some people might see this as a field of weeds, but actually what we're standing on is a field of some of the rarest plants in northwest Europe, and the Burren is the best place to find them. And what's rare is valuable, as they say. So this is why we have a programme here, because of these rare plants. I'm standing in a little grass called the Ferragorta, the famine grass. They say it grows where people die during the famine times, and as you stand on it, the hunger comes up from the ground into your belly and you get this weakness called the Ferragorta.
Okay.
Beside my right foot is a little yellow flower called lady's bedstraw that was used years ago to help people sleep. They used to stuff pillows with this plant and it relaxed the person and helped them to sleep at night. Another little white plant at my foot is called Squinancywort, and it was used to treat quinsy, which is a disease of the throat. Over there, a foot away, is a little thistle called the golden carline thistle, which was once, the head of it was chopped off and used as a dessert. It was cured in honey, would you believe?
Okay.
So every plant here has a story about.
And we came across some John's wort down there.
St. John's wort, which is very important for treating depression. A lot of yarrow around here, which is used to treat arthritis. So all of these plants, we have about 700 plants in the Burren, and all of them have a story. A lot of them are used for medicinal purposes or treating animals or humans. A lot of them have folklore associated with them. So they're amazing. Whether you like looking flowers or not, these are extraordinary plants with extraordinary histories to them, and very important hosts for a range of bees and butterflies and important species. Again, whether you like them or not, these species are rare. We need to look after them.
So we have some hazel here, I suppose. Is it hazel? Hazel is what's maybe seen as a negative to the Burren, is it?
It can be. Now, it's a native species, so we do love the hazel, but when it becomes invasive like this, so you can see there's a big clump of hazel, holly and whitethorn here in front of us. Scrub, low scrub, maybe about 1.5 meters high, you can see there. So when that comes in, it pushes all those rare wildflowers, those orchids and those special flowers out, because those small flowers need a lot of light and they need a lot of open space. But scrub, which is natural cover for the Burren, starts coming in when you stop farming, because if you stop farming, the Burren goes back to where it came from, which is a woodland. So what's happening now in the Burren and elsewhere in Ireland and Europe is that rough areas like this are being abandoned, or farming is reducing, and they're going back to kind of a different type of vegetation, often scrub or dominated by bracken or certain grasses. And they become a bit of fire hazard as well at certain times of the year, gorse especially, I suppose, but different grasses as well. So that's another reason for sustaining farming in these areas, because you offset the risk of fire in future as well. Okay. But the Burren is about 20% of it will be covered with scrub now. It's increasing all the time, and that's why we need to intervene at this point. We figure farmers are producing not just great food in the Burren, but also great landscape and great biodiversity, and we feel that we need to support them and reward them to do that.
That's Brendan Dunford speaking on the Burren programme here in Burren, County Clare. Thanks very much, Brendan.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast.
Now let's move to West Cork, where our correspondent Tommy Moyles joined contractor Adrian Levis on his annual trip to Cape Clare Island. Despite the beautiful weather this year, Adrian is not going there on his summer holidays.
Adrian is bailing for the farmers here on the island. Describe what you have to do here. From the start?
Yeah. Once you leave home?
Yeah, well, we leave home with a van full of gear, a tractor, a baler, a tractor and wrapper, drive a half an hour to Baltimore, get on the Roro, do a 40-minute journey across the water. We bale somewhere in the region of 700 bales in, say, 3 days, about 70 fields, give you a rough idea of the size of the fields. And hope everything goes well. The van, you want to know what's inside the van? Tell me, yeah. The van has enough diesel for tractors for the 3 days. It has spare netting. It has plastic to supply the islanders with their plastic. Full tools, spanners, welder, generator, angle grinder, air compressor, a bale handler, all this stuff.
Any wonder it's hard to reverse it up a hillside?
No, it would be overweight, right, I'd say. Yeah, and I hope everything goes according to plan.
You were telling me there that you come here this week every year,
pretty
much regardless of weather?
Yeah, pretty much regardless of weather. We come out on the Monday, the last week in June, on the Monday morning, and there has been years the weather has been okay. There's been years that you could make hay in a couple of days out here, so this is one of them years they've hit it lucky.
A bit relaxed this year.
Yeah. No, they're still fussy. They don't like making wet silage out of it.
Yeah. What happens in that case? You just stop here for
sometimes the worst year I ever had out here, the tractors were here for 2.5 weeks.
You were obviously in and out.
No, we were at home. We just could do nothing. It just started raining and we parked up and we had no tractor at home. I didn't do much.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Finally, let's join my colleague Una Sinnott and berry farmer John Green on his farm in Gorey, County Wexford. Una asked John about his business, the impact of extreme weather since the start of this year, and even got to taste new varieties of strawberries.
And we are standing in between two lovely crates of strawberries. John, they're very vibrant red here beside us.
Yeah, that's a new variety, Una. That's strawberries come in two types, really. Summer fruit and strawberries are what we would traditionally have produced and eaten. They would normally, left alone, come in on the middle of June, right? So that's the kind of variety we've traditionally grown in North Europe. Then in the Mediterranean climates, they tend to grow an ever-bearing strawberry. And that means that as long as there's light and there's heat, you're going to get a crop from probably April to October from the same plant, right? Traditionally, the summer fruiting ones, as you know yourself, strawberry season was only 3 weeks long. And the reason for that was strawberries just came in June and they were gone and there was nothing else to eat in July, August or September, right? The way we manipulate those is we just cold store some plants. We plant strawberries, maybe 10,000 plants every week, and then we get continuity, right? But the easy way around that is to plant an everbearer. And the everbearer you plant once and you crop all summer long. The downside has always been that the taste is quite poor. So you go into a supermarket and you get a Spanish strawberry, an Egyptian strawberry, a Moroccan strawberry. Generally speaking, it might look quite well, but it's not going to taste very good. You know, it's going to taste turnipy. But these everbearers now, this is the first one we've grown that we actually think the taste is really acceptable, you know. In fact, in taste tests, as long as you allow it to ripen, people are actually beginning to prefer it to our traditional summer fruit and strawberry.
So you have a new strategy, don't you, for pricing your strawberries? Or you have a sort of a plan maybe for the future?
Well, definitely the plan for the future seems to be probably coming with age, I'd say, and from years of
spending 70-80 hours a week on a farm and having it all reinvested, you know. You're very inclined now, or at least we're very inclined now to say, right, we have to have some respect for ourselves, for our labour, for our workers. You know, like a lot of farmers don't count their own time, don't value their own time. I think we plan to value our time. What we do requires a good level of expertise. It requires really good staff. Generally speaking, if you cut the price of something, somebody doesn't get paid. A supplier, the taxman, the person working, you know, somebody suffers. So we're going to try to emphasise high quality at a price that allows us to do a good job and to have some decent return for ourselves and for the effort we put in.
So we have a taste test going on here now, John, and they taste fantastic, don't they?
Yeah, these ones are full of juice. They have a lovely shape. But again, the secret is to let them go a reasonably red colour. You know, if you pick up a strawberry and there are spots of orange on it, it's not really ready for picking, you know. It's the same with tomatoes. You know the way tomatoes come in all these days, and they come in and it's very hard to get a tomato that tastes like one you grow at home, you know, and that's because they're often picked green and they're allowed to ripen then in transport or whatever, you know. But if you can wait till they're ripe, then you've got a completely different taste. They've ripened naturally, you know.
These are really gorgeous now. So there's also, you know, the question of the weather to start 2018, and how did that affect your farm and your growing season?
Disastrously, yeah, to be honest. Yeah, so the hurricane came and we thought that we had all our polytunnels strengthened up to deal with, you know. Like there's about 100 polytons on the farm. Probably 35 of them maybe or so stay covered during the winter. And we had minimal damage after the hurricane because the wind came from basically from that direction, you know, it was sheltered by the roadway there and so on. So that wasn't too bad. Some damage, thought, okay, we got over that.
Thought you were out of the woods.
Yeah, exactly. Then the snow came, and the first day of the snow was Thursday, I think, and we were out around the farm, and yet the snow was on top of the polytunnels, but it was lovely and flaky, and it seemed to be powdery, and I thought, okay, there's no big weight in that, you know. But day two here in the Gorey area, day two did the damage, you know, and it was absolute devastation. So 27 of them with crops inside were flattened. Wow. So yeah, it's taken 8 men, 10 weeks, non-stop rebuilding from scratch, really. Actually, even worse than rebuilding because dismantling first. And clearing out all the, you know, the broken up steel and whatever.
And was this one that we're in at the moment?
This one has been completely rebuilt, yeah. Actually, these 10 have been completely rebuilt.
And how much would that set you back then? Was it was a big financial?
Well, I'd say there was €100,000 worth of damage, plus not counting crops, just infrastructure, so a sickener. But as I said, you know, last year was a good year, so we could carry it. Had it happened 4 or 5 years ago, it would have been a different story, you know.
And is there anything that you can do as a farmer if you knew that next season was going to be as bad, the winter season? Like, is there anything you can do to try strengthen the polytunnels even more? Yeah,
we've put a load of steel in. You can see all the supports and whatever. And in fact, there are more still to go in here. I think what we'd do, if it was really... There are a couple of things. We'd probably be tempted. It would have been cheap to actually cut the polythene off. That would have been a start. And then we'd have been at the loss of the polythene, which is fine, but not the steel, you know. And if you were absolutely desperate, I think it seems like a cruel thing to do. And of course, if the snow didn't come to the depth you thought, then you'd have cut all your covers off, you know. So you'd have to go back and redo that, which is a cost in itself. But nevertheless, if it was going to be as bad again, either vent them really high so the plastic would be up really high, and because it wasn't the snow sitting on top that was the problem, it was the snow when it fell off. And then it fell in between each tunnel and it pushed in all the sides, you know. So that's where the problem lay. But I know the Gorey area was badly hit. Lots of my friends around the country didn't seem to suffer as badly, you know. So the plant itself finds it very hard to differentiate between winter and summer. So we would have tried to compensate for that by using lighting and stuff like that. But certainly this year the cold winter has paid off with brilliant crops.
Thanks very much, John, and the very best of luck with your farm here. It's magnificent to walk around, and it's a credit to you now and all your staff, so thanks a million.
Okay, thanks a million.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. We wish you all the best in dealing with the drought, and we have more advice in this week's Irish Farmers Journal at farmersjournal.ie and in our new app. Please be extra careful with machinery, slurry and fire safety in the heat. There's been too many accidents in the past few days and no sign of rain yet, so take it easy.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.